On BBC One this evening, there's a star lineup for this year's Royal Variety performance in the presence of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The show's in two parts, beginning at 8:15, and then after a break for the news, the curtain goes up again at 9:15. It was 60 years ago today, the 14th that the British Broadcasting Company put out its first programme. And on BBC One now, marking this Diamond Jubilee, some memories of the heyday of the wireless after the coronation in 1953. Those radio times.
What is a wireless set?
My lord, I protest. We have proved the wireless set.
You have produced an article, but you have not established the nature of the article.
Very good. My lord, look at it.
I am looking at it.
Life was a thrill for me.
I'm sorry, my lord, but the interruption was quite accidental.
Quite so. But alternatively, it is very pleasant. Please continue.
Away with dull care, the day is set fair, a wireless set near to bring us good cheer. In winter time or summertime, or leisure time and pleasure time, the daily times at Big Ben chimes are radio times. For Christmas time, the party time, for dinner time or dancing time, the daily times at Big Ben chimes are radio times. Olden days had different ways, their pleasures then were fewer. Modern days will get my praise, our wireless ways are newer. A stirring time, a whirring time, a record time for father time, the daily times at Big Ben chimes are radio times.
It has been decided to permit the establishment of a number of broadcasting stations. Adequate service has been guaranteed by 6 leading electrical firms. These firms have undertaken to finance the service for a period of 2 years.
Program from London. We begin this evening with a concert by the Gershon Parkinson Quintet, who will play Liebestraum, Love's Dream by Liszt.
And I happened to build myself a wireless set, which had valves and coils and heaven knows what, and I put this thing together, and it worked. And I listened to this thing, and I heard broadcasting going on. It was very simple and not very good quality. And I thought to myself, well, this sounds rather interesting. To begin with, there were a certain number of people who thought that it was a frightful intrusion into their privacy in their house, that they were fearful of the fact that because they could sit at home and hear you, some of them had this quaint idea that therefore we could hear them.
I was asked to play for the early radio, what they called wireless in those days, in 1923. The intimacy of the place was so attractive if we produced a musical comedy, you had your tenor sitting next to you, and if you had a little serenade to accompany them, it was very comfortable because they were there. And the announcers were in the same studio. We knew everybody. We knew the names of everybody. Sir John Reith, of course, Mr. Reith, but he was then. He was always around, and the controller, and we were just friendly with everybody.
I wrote to the controller, Admiral Sir Charles Carpenter, and he invited me to go and have an interview, which I did, and I interviewed him on the top floor, third floor, and it was in a passage. And he himself, with Sir Lindsay Wellington, who later became controller of radio, were both on the staff, and they were both taking part in a play in the studio, because the staff all had to do everything.
It was a beautifully decorated studio. We had very, very artistic. We had a host who welcomed the artists who came in, which was really nice. And there was always a little cabinet and gave a nice little drink. I mean, the artists, not poor musicians.
It was rather strange to walk into this room, have 2 chairs placed for us, and sit down in front of this great big box. And we thought to ourselves, well, if we're going to do it, we better do a good one. So we picked out all the best things we did in our ordinary work and did that. And then for some reason, somebody had sent us a song, and we finished on it for no reason at all. It was called When Tommy Atkins Taught the Chinese How to Charleston Out in Chinatown. If that means anything to you, it doesn't mean anything to me much.
First time I actually broadcast was with a little touring concert party, and we were playing at the Alexander Gardens in Weymouth. All they did was put a sort of fish tank on the stage in front of us, and we did our normal show and took no notice of this thing. And then somebody said to me, I heard you on the wireless the other day. The wireless, we called it. And I said, how was it? They said, oh, it was very good. I said, oh, I wish I'd known about it.
The whole thing was exploration, experiments, and trying to persuade people to listen to the wireless. The main program really was the Children's Hour every day for 3/4 of an hour. And the point about the program was that it was intended to attract the children, so the children could then join what was called the radio circle.
People wrote in about birthdays. This is Jimmy so-and-so, so-and-so. Will you look at the bottom of the grandfather clock? There's a present from Auntie Fanny. Or lift Granny's seat, which she's probably sitting on, and you'll find underneath it probably a broken egg or something. But they were personal. And then there was always, if it was twins, and I think I'm right, it was Rafe de Rohan, who was the wicked uncle with a heavy voice that was always upsetting things. But he used to have to come forward and always say, hello, twins. And there was a sort of noise in the studio, you know. They were personal, they came into your life.
It was really through these children that perhaps they'd go to school and say, my name was mentioned on the wireless and I was wished many happy returns by the wireless. And the other children might then say, well, why wasn't mine? Well, you haven't joined the radio circle. Which meant that if they joined the radio circle, the parents then had to go off and buy a license. And so the 10 shillings started to come in. We were selling 10-shilling licenses, really.
That's 53. Now that must be that house across there. Good day, madam. I'm Inspector of Wireless Licenses from the General Post Office.
Switch off that state from the post office.
I see you have a wireless set. Would you allow me to inspect your wireless license, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I've omitted to get one.
You've omitted to get a wireless license? I'm sorry, madam. In the circumstances, the Postmaster General's got no other alternative but to prosecute you.
Yeah,
Good day, madam.
Good day.
We regret to have to announce that all efforts at compromise between the Trades Union Council and the government regarding the position in the coal fields having failed, a general strike will begin tomorrow at midnight.
The public was being told not only what was happening with your local bulletins, you were told what was happening in Newcastle, what was happening in Glasgow, what was happening in Swansea. And the national bulletins were putting this out. And this attracted an enormous number of people. I think the figures will show the licenses went leaping up. The effect of the general strike on broadcasting was the fact that it suddenly dawned on people that this was a medium which was intensely valuable at a time of emergency.
An emergency service of trains will be run tomorrow as follows. Southern Railway, Victoria to Brighton, stopping at Red Hill and Haywards Heath.
I think it dawned on people that this was something which really was important, not just a toy as it had been up to then.
A drum, Macbeth doth come. The weird sisters, hand in hand.
Roosters of the sea and land.
Thus do go about, thrice to thine,
and thrice to mine.
Fog is getting thicker. It's terrifying.
Don't worry. I know every inch of the river.
What's that?
Shh. It's gulls. We've disturbed them. They rest at night on the barges.
Better keep closer to the bank. They'll give us away. I can just see the dark outline of it.
Hand me the rope, will you?
So they found a hotel, and the manager said, I'm very sorry, but I've only got one room where you can, you can be on the bed. So the girl said, I thought so. So they had some supper.
Oh, they did have supper.
And after supper,
Yes.
he said, I suppose we both better, there's nothing else to... on the... Would you like to hear the rest of it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Once again, Bandwagon brazenly presents Chestnut Corner. All the things we come out with. My wife's a decided blonde.
I know, I was with her when she decided. Excuse me, sir, but can you spare me a shilling for a cup of coffee?
Shilling? That's a lot for a cup of coffee, isn't it?
Listen, are you trying to tell me how to run my business?
What could be nicer than a nightingale in a tree?
A lark in a field.
How did you lose your hair?
We came to the point where the theatrical impresarios put the bar up against us appearing on radio because they thought it would detract from the attendances, the bums on seats in the theatre. And it had the absolute opposite effect. People heard this voice on the radio and thought, oh, I'd like to go and see that fella.
We were doing our concerts. We used to do concerts and sonics and all that kind of thing. And we got 3 things in one night. One, I think, at the Holborn Restaurant, one at Frescartis, one somewhere else. Savoy, I think. And at each place they said, do the Cockney women. We said, do the Cockney women. We don't do Cockney women. You know, the Mrs. Waters at it. And so they said, you the Cockney women. And so we said, no, we don't. And when we got to the last place, we said to the man who was running it, what do people keep saying doing the Cockney women for? I said, well, Christopher Stone played your record on a wireless today.
Look here, girls. You're funny. You're great. You're stupendous. How'd you like to broadcast tonight?
Broadcast? Tonight? How much?
Oh, there'll be no fee, but look at the advertisement.
No money.
Well, how about a couple of quid each?
A couple of quid? Oh, I'd do more than broadcast for that. I'll be outcast for less.
It's a bet, then?
It's a wage.
Right. Good girls. What are your names?
Nellie.
Nellie. Lily. Right. Be here at 8 sharp.
Lummy, the first for years.
Your script had to be vetted half a dozen times, and if you wandered off script, and I was always a great ad-libber. Oh, how can be a great ad-libber? But I used to ad-lib a lot and found I couldn't do it on radio. I had to do what was printed there.
I'll tell you some of the things you mustn't do. You mustn't call a Chinaman a chink. You mustn't call a coloured person a nigger. You mustn't make fun of any impediment. And you mustn't, and you mustn't, and you mustn't. If you did any of these things, you were out, and you were out forever after.
I once said lousy, and I once said hell, and was summoned to Reed's office and apologised and said it slipped out. I got a bit excited, you know, and got into trouble about that.
We're the men who thrill the nation with an Oxford intonation. We announce the program at the NBG.
If you're a broadcaster, criticism is part of your life. You're bound to get it. I used to get it from Reith. Reith once said to me, "It's a great pity, Snag, you announce so badly because after all you've got an educated voice." We were very lucky in a way because for a long, long time the critics or the listener were pretty mute. For a long, long time they were so astonished to be able to think they could be at home the moment a goal was scored or the horse passed the finishing post or a try or something, and what the situation boat race was, that they were very uncritical.
Now Sutton is picking up the stroke, giving them a good hard tap. Going in, out. 1, out. 2, out. 3, out. 4, out. 5, out. They're going up a little. 6, out. Out could have gone up quite a good, go up half a length now. There's only a length behind.
Quite a wonderful thing for the public, for the whole of the multitude, that they heard music whenever they switched on their little radio. They would hear something, light music or classical music, and it opened it out to everybody. They all took such an interest in it, and we had more people then coming to the concerts. It didn't drive people away from concerts because they could listen at home. They came to the concerts in the hundreds then.
Regarded rather as special kind of people in those days. If you appeared on a one-night thing, you would get autograph people, and whilst you were playing, you would get a huge crowd around the bandstand, you know, rather like the pop scene now. You could tell, in actual fact, the night of the week it was. You know, if you happened to forget, you'd say, who's on radio? Ambrose. Oh, it's Saturday night.
You are listening to Ambrose and his orchestra playing a medley of tunes that were popular over the air.
Just one more chance to prove it's you alone I care for. Each night I say a little prayer for. Just one more chance. I've learnt the meaning of repentance. Now you're the jury at my trial. I know that I should serve my sentence. Still I'm hoping all the while you'll give me just one more word. I said that I was glad to start out, but now I'm back to cry my heart out for just one more chance.
be a solo vocalist with a regular broadcasting band meant that you got round to your regular listeners, and that they used to listen in sometimes just purely for the singers, not necessarily for the band. And you had your own following. And this was really the only way that anyone built up a career for the future for, say, going out on the variety theatre, because the variety theatres wouldn't put you on top of the bill unless you had a name, and the only way you really could get a name was through radio.
We'd do a live broadcast of an hour and a half, 10:30 till midnight, and Ambrose would put a large placard up by the side of the band, just on the right-hand side there, apologising to the diners that I'm sorry that the band will be rather louder than usual, but we are broadcasting. It'll soon be over, it's painless, and by 12 o'clock you'll be back to drinking your soup. Each and every band had its own particular signature tune by which it was known. Billy Cotton was Somebody Stole My Gal, which was very brash. Somebody stole my gal, wah, wah, wah. It was one of those, you know. Ambrose was When Day Is Done. Henry Hall was Here's to the Next Time.
I used to say, hello everyone, this is Henry Hall speaking. We're going to play all of them. And so on and so on.
Hello everyone, this is Henry Hall speaking. The BBC Dance Orchestra is going to play to you Piccadilly Ride.
When we appeared for the first time in public, the reception I had was fantastic. And I knew from that moment the name of Henry Hall would be on everybody's lips. The audience of that time was a ready-made audience. And I think they loved us as part of broadcasting. I wrote my own signature song, which was reminiscent of a march I wrote for the Salvation Army. And it became Here's to the Next Time. The glory of it, and the thrill of the first few bars was amazing.
And so we come to the end of another programme played to you by the BBC Dance Orchestra, directed by Henry Hall. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
I think it was a sort of a source of wonderment to them. You know, they imagined a big palace and this sound was coming from this very special place, a place where probably they would never have a chance to ever go in, you know, and it was rather, you know, ethereal. It was something very special.
Somewhere the sun is shining, so honey, don't you cry. We'll find a silver lining, the clouds will soon roll by. I hear a robin singing upon a treetop high. To you and me he's singing, the clouds will soon roll by. Each little tear and sorrow only brings you closer to me. Just wait until tomorrow, what a happy day that will be. Down Lover's Lane together,
professioneller politischer Verbände, die in ihrer koalitionsbedingten Kompromisspolitik personelle...
At home, we are, as it were, taking the strain for what may lie ahead of us, resolved and confident. We look with pride and thankfulness on the never-failing courage and devotion of the Royal Navy.
You know, you'll find you've got a surprising lot of good things worth passing on. You can't expect things to be as good as they were for you in peacetime, so try to make the best of things as you find them. Cheer yourself up with the brighter things around you, and with a smile, with a song.
I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow, got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love. I've got a song that I sing, I can make the rain go anytime I move my finger. Lucky me, can't you see, I'm in love. Life is a beautiful thing, as long as I hold the string. I'd be a silly so-and-so if I should ever let go. I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow, got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love.
And that's all my news and music. You'll hear from me again next week. Good night, boys. Sincerely yours, Vera Lynn.
We'll meet again, don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day.
You have been listening to Vera Lynn's Letter from Home. With her was Fred Hartley and his music.
All my songs had an optimistic thought or a line like White Cliffs of Dover, we'll meet again, and you'll never know. It was about love, about staying together and being faithful, and, you know, things that would make way feel that things were going on normal at home.
This is one of the most awe-striking periods in the long history of France and Britain. It is also, beyond doubt, the most sublime. The long night of barbarism will descend, unbroken even by a star of hope, unless we conquer, as conquer we must, as conquer we shall.
Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, by J.M. Barrie. There was once a gentleman...
I wish he'd been a lady.
I wish he'd been a white rat.
Quiet, Nibs. There was a lady also. The gentleman's name was Mr. Darling, and the lady's name was Mrs. Darling. They had 3 descendants. Oh. Now, these 3 children had a faithful nurse called Nana. What a funny name. But Mr. Darling, or was it Mrs. Darling, was angry with her and chained her up in the yard. So all the children flew away, and they flew to the Neverland, where the lost boys are. Now I want you to consider the feelings of the unhappy parents, with all their children flown away. Think of the empty bed. But our heroine knew that her mother would always leave the window open for her progeny to fly back by. So they stayed away for years and had a lovely time. Did they ever go back?
Children's Hour was a lifeline, a continuing link with home and the old days. And I think it was Uncle Mac himself who coined the words, "Good night, children, everywhere," which was deliberately done to bring in people scattered all over the place and feel that they were still all part of the same world.
Good morning, everybody. Here is the first news bulletin for today, Friday, January the 10th. German aircraft carried out a number of attacks on Great Britain last night. The raids were scattered over many parts of the country. Fire bombs were dropped in many places, but they were quickly dealt with by the fire services and members of the newly formed fire squads. All the fires have now been brought under control.
If there was bad news, all right, it had to be given. I used to say to all the announcers at the time, now, when you get this, if it comes in the middle of a bulletin, box it, as I used to tell them. That is to say, when you've finished what you've got to say, give a pause so people will say what's happened. 20 seconds, of course. And then give the bad news. And then have 2 or 3 seconds after giving the bad news, and then go on to the rest of the bulletin. It drew attention to the news and recognized the fact that there was somebody at the other end who might be seriously affected by this particular piece of bad news.
2 Fortress aircraft are missing from a formation which carried out a long-distance reconnaissance flight. The German long-range guns on the French coast spasmodically fired across the English Channel.
Bombed an important factory hidden in the woods of the Rhineland, while coastal command machines attacked targets off the Norwegian coast.
Submarines and aircraft in the Mediterranean have had big successes against Italian Russian front. German pressure is still heaviest in the Leningrad area. Certain kinds of cooked bacon will soon be available without coupons. Men between 18 and 60 will have to register for the fire guard on the 14th, 20th and 21st of this month.
Sample of a special broadcast going out to our men overseas. And coming to the mic is the RAF's radio girlfriend, Jane Welsh.
Hello there, boys. This is Jane Welsh speaking. I'm here to act as your big sister in this country, your sort of radio girlfriend on this side of the Atlantic. I hope you're going to write to me, because if you do, I'm going to reply to you personally. And besides that, I'm going to do something else.
Mrs. Brown turns on the wireless to listen to Freddie Gricewood on the kitchen front.
Your idea again. Any recipe that uses potatoes is bound to be a favorite. I've got one here for a pudding sent in by Mrs. Brown of 1950.
Calling all workers.
Music while you work will be played to you this morning on Rhythmic Records.
Your uncle's out in there, the place where they've got the big thingamajig, the Sphinx, something awful. Oh, there you are, Mr. Smith. Oh, yes, well, if it isn't Canteen Clara, the whistle-smacking bomber. I say, you look a bit tousled. Have you thrown off the handle?
No, sir. I've been fire-watching for the first time.
You have a chaperone?
Oh, yes, sir. And a very nice, polite chap he was, too. Always said pardon before he took his boots off.
I should hate to hear what he said before he took his socks off. Did he take you on the roof?
Yes, we went on the tyres together.
Oh? And what did he say when the barrage started? Get down them flares. Did you keep awake all night?
But I kept alert, sir. But I was never all clear.
Servicemen would tell me how they listened to the programs, maybe while they were on board ship, and they would have the radio on while they were under fire, and the men. The stories I've heard about the officers who have had to literally stop fighting while they listened to the program.
Here's merry-go-round, going round the services week by week, bringing music and fun to boys and girls in khaki and 2 shades of blue. To all you servicemen and women, wherever you are. This week, the predominating color is once again Air Force Blue. now with Richard Murdoch, Kenneth Horne, Sam Coster, the Royal Air Force takes the air.
At much grinding in the marsh, we've had a bit of monetary trouble. At much grinding in the marsh, the cash in hand should be exactly double. At pay parade on Friday, we shall be in quite a state. Instead of £90 in cash, we've only 2 and 8.
Flashes from the control tower. That's the sign. It's our turn to go now. We're fourth to go. And the whole of our 4 engines are giving out a full-throated roar as we start to slowly gather speed down the 1.5 mile wrong runway. So there we go. We're clear. We're airborne and on our way to join the stream of bombers making towards Berlin. I'm standing forward, and right forward of me, Bill, our 6-foot bomb aimer, is curled up in his compartment, surrounded by perspex glass. But right in front of me sits again the pilot in the green glow from his instrument panel, just lighting up the outline of his face, and then behind me, Con, the navigator, he's an Aussie from Brisbane, has just got his ruler out over our maps. And then behind we've got our mid-upper gunner. He was in advertising before the war, and he's the last man I can see.
Bomb doors open. Bomb doors open, Bombardier. Steady. Bomb's going. 2, 3. Bomb's still going. Hey, Jimmy, trains are behind us. Bomb's steady, man. Hurry up, Jimmy, hold it up. He's shot down. He's shot down. Did you shoot him down? Yeah. Yeah, he's got him, boy, right in the middle. Bloody good. Bloody good. Right about Reagan, keep weaving. There's some slack coming at me. Okay, don't shout all at once.
We're leaving a huge glow of red. Red flares fall as we watch. We're out of it, and I got a glimpse of that furious glowing carpet of light. That's all we can now see of Berlin.
In the early days, well, it was rather a sporting contest. There was still the feeling of decent fellows going to war. By the time we did that bombing air raid, they'd bombed us. We'd had suffered. There'd been tragedy. We were in a very low ebb of the war effort to begin with. The clouds were just clearing. Alamein was over. They'd started to land in Sicily. And so there was a marvelous feeling of confidence surging. And people didn't feel that they wanted to gloat or anything. They wanted it a sober, steadfast account of what actually happened.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is a special bulletin read by John Snagg. D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress.
When something really important was happening, it was my job to go and make these big announcements, and it became known as the voice of doom. In fact, I was forbidden by Sir William Haley at one time to go near the microphone because apparently Churchill had had a stroke, and it was known by a large number that he'd had it.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of... But in the interest of saving lives, the ceasefire began yesterday to be sounded along all the fronts. The German war is therefore at an end.
I couldn't imagine what people would have done without the radio. They wanted to keep up with the news, they wanted to know what was going on, all their loved ones were away, and they wanted to know exactly what was happening. And, well, a silent world would have been terrible, I think, in those days.
Hello, children, everywhere. Once upon a time, there was a little chimney sweep, and his name was Tom. He lived in a great town in the North Country, where there were plenty of chimneys to sweep. He could neither read nor write. He never washed himself, and he had never been taught to say his prayers. But though he cried half
good
his
houses.
So they are, Pooh.
And Christopher Robin has a house, and Owl and Kangaroo and Rabbit have houses, and even Rabbit's friends and relations have houses or somethings, but poor Eeyore has nothing.
Nothing? Don't, Pooh.
So what I've been thinking is, let's build him a house.
The driver shut off steam and put on brakes. The toad got down on the step, and as the train slowed down to almost a walking pace, he heard the driver call out,
Now, jump.
Goodbye, and thank you.
Children's Hour got its name from a quotation from a funny little poem by Longfellow, which begins, I think I've got it right, between the dusk and the daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupation that is known as the Children's Hour. This is the BBC Home Service. Hello, children. We present now, by Anthony Buckridge, Jennings at School.
Hey, look out! It's Mr. Carter and old Wilkie coming now. Don't say a word. Okay. Be very careful, you gentlemen. We are caught. We really had it.
Suspiciously quiet in here all of a sudden, don't you think, Carter?
Certainly is, Wilkins. No reason, I suppose, Jennings?
Oh, no, sir. No reason. Well, no special reason, that is, sir.
Good. Ah, Derbyshire.
I've often heard it said that Children's Hour was too middle-class a program, and I think that that is nonsense, and I always do think, or did think that was nonsense. I mean, a princess is a princess, and a giant is a giant, and there's no question of him being a grade B or a welfare giant or anything like that. It's... No, you looked at the whole thing. You weren't talking down or talking up or talking round any particular background. You were just talking, you were telling stories, you were telling exciting things.
Dick Barton, Special Agent. Dick Barton and his friends suspect that the Coastal Queen, which has requested permission to put in at London docks with engine trouble, is connected in some way with Betts and Hartman. While Inspector Burke is contacting the War Office regarding Betts' plan to poison reservoirs, Dick, Snowy and Jock set out in a motor launch to meet the Coastal Queen.
It was to be an experiment, a daily serial, which had never happened in this country at any rate before. A sort of thriller daily serial, a sort of strip cartoon in sound, if you like.
Hello, Mr. Barton. And how is my favorite He-Man this morning?
Got a slight headache at the moment, thank you. How's our Henrietta?
In much better shape than you and your friends.
Well, what are you going to do now? Stick red-hot knitting needles into us?
It's an idea. Unfortunately, we haven't time to play games just now.
Some other time, maybe.
I think not, Mr. Barton. You have played your last game.
Oh, blimey. Haven't we heard that remark before, sir?
After it had been launched and had become such a success, and the children latched onto it, the reacted, as we would say today, and I think that they thought, oh, my goodness me. There is a girl cruising around. Her position in the household is somewhat anomalous. She must go. He mustn't drink. He mustn't smoke. And out went all the sort of natural things.
Well, that's the future trend. Cattle born without horns, and somehow or other we've got to get that into the arches.
Well, all right, Godfrey. Who in the village of Ambridge, our village, would object to cattle without horns?
Oh, the traditionalists, of course, the elder generation.
The old people, the old yokels.
Wow.
In the village pub.
Yeah, don't look the same at all. Tain't natural.
Okay,
Interfering with God's creatures.
Uh-huh. So we can play it for comedy. Well, all right, I'll take the comedy line. Now let's dream up some drama, romance.
Do you mean they might be thinking of getting married?
I don't know. I haven't discussed it with them. And they haven't discussed it with me.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it, Grace? Because it's what you've always wanted.
Yes, you told me Mrs. Carey'd make a fine wife for your father. You told me that ages ago.
Ages ago, yes. Perhaps I did. But now, I'm not so sure.
Oh, Sally, doesn't it seem years since we came here? Who'd have thought that one day I'd be living in this house?
It looks larger than ever, now that poor old Dr. Andrews' furniture is gone.
If only we'd been certain we were coming, I'd have bought some things at the auction.
Mummy, I'm sure the sitting room carpet will never fit in here.
No, I'm dreadfully worried about carpets.
Ladies and gentlemen, Life with the Lion. Once again, we'd like you to meet the Lion family. I'm Richard Lion.
I'm Barbara Lion.
I'm Ben Lion.
And I'm Bibi Daniels Lion.
I think people like radio families, especially if they're lonely and if they don't have a great many friends of their own. They are creating friends, relatives, neighbours, and it's this kind of identification. It's a spin-off of some old lady sitting by herself, and she has suddenly found she's got a daughter-in-law. She's found she's got a cousin. She's found she's a naughty child in the family. She can identify and say, there's that woman coming in for a cup of tea again, the cheek. And she's actually going through all the emotions, and she has had created for her an ideal family with all the frustrations, but glamorised, of course.
I was asked to do the coronation, which was, I always said at the time, and I still say, if I never broadcast again, it was, for me, the most remarkable occasion that we would ever hope to see. When the time came for the actual entry of the Queen, and you had the music going, and you had the tremendous noise, and the wonderful beauty of the whole thing and the build-up for it, because you didn't want to talk at all. You just wanted to look. And you had to sort of kick yourself and say, get on with it. I mean, you've got a job to do.
Dean of Westminster brings the crown. The Archbishop takes it from the crimson cushion. He raises it high in the sight of the people and reverently places it on the Queen's head. Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, is crowned.
Television showed the picture, but on radio you had to keep talking all the way through. I wasn't aware of the fact that it was more important, but I knew it was the beginning of it and that it was coming, and that it would soon become one of the two ugly sisters to the Cinderella of radio.
Whose kingdom endureth forever.
Come on and make a trip upon the bandwagon. It's a wild voice, it's a grand. Take it from here, don't go away when you can take it from here.
They're telling you to take an easy chair and settle by the fireside. Look at your radio time. For Monday night at 8 is on the air.
BBC Radio recalls Life with the Lions, one of its classic comedy shows from the 1950s, at 5 o'clock this afternoon on Radio 2 medium wave. While at the same time on BBC One, some highlights are recalled from yesterday's football in the games between Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur and West Ham United and Norwich City in Match of the Day. Before that, some cartoon fun, courtesy of Mickey and Donald.